Corpse running made sense 10 years ago, but nowadays it's holding games back. And I'm not saying that because it's hard, but because it no longer fits where the genre is headed. While corpse running was a thing for years before Demon Souls, it's most famous for its inclusion in the Dark Souls series. Back then, it worked perfectly. Games were linear, so you would die during a platform challenge or boss fight, and since there weren't many other places to go, getting your stuff back added tension without any real downside. It was a no drawback way to make gameplay feel urgent. But nowadays, things have changed. Games like Hollow Knight and Elden Ring are more open, and a multitude of alternate routes available to players serves as encouragement to explore, get stronger, or try something else when you keep losing. Not bash your head against the wall until you win. However, while the gameplay loop now encourages exploration, corpse running entices players to repeatedly tackle the same challenge. This contradiction pushes developers to spend more time and resources making things like the sacrificial twig in Elden Ring, in-game mechanics that mitigate a feature which doesn't even need to exist anymore. And speaking from experience, when I played Hollow Knight, Silksong, and Elden Ring, corpse running didn't add the adrenaline it was supposed to. I was either frustrated, annoyed by the inconvenience, or completely indifferent. Once you get good at these games, death itself becomes the only moment that matters, not the following corpse run. The mechanic was designed to heighten tension through adrenaline, but ended up doing everything but. Yet, when I was doing platforming areas like Sen's Fortress and Blighttown, corpse running hit different. Progress depended solely on my execution, because you can't overlevel platforming challenges for obvious reasons. The stakes of dying were real, and this tension was intentional. I was never concerned about corpse running after losing a boss fight, cause I could either pick up my stuff before fighting, or leave them knowing I'ma get double the amount after beating the boss. But in mandatory platforming sections, the weight on my shoulders felt like I was trailing in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Newer games rarely replicate the same kind of tension, and that's because the source of difficulty changed. In Dark Souls 1, much of the challenge came from the journey itself. In areas like Sen's Fortress, you had to survive deadly platforming and environmental challenges to move forward. By comparison, many of the bosses in these areas were straightforward once you reached them, especially before in Orlando. But in newer games like Elden Ring, Hollow Knight, and Silksong, the balance has flipped. Platforming and exploration still tend to be difficult, especially in Silksong with trap benches and areas like Biowater. But the biggest challenges are almost always the boss fights. These harder bosses are the main reason why I think corpse running is outdated. These newer bosses aren't meant to be beaten on the first try, they're designed around learning. You're supposed to die, learn patterns, adjust your timing, and try again. And if you ever get tired or tilted, you can always go and explore somewhere else rather than putting the game down. That's the gameplay loop. You can see the developers supporting this idea through the game design. Like boss runbacks being reduced significantly to make retries more efficient. The modern design encourages players to engage with challenges thoughtfully, using each boss attempt as a training rep to better understand the patterns and strategies needed to succeed. And that's why corpse running starts feeling out of place. Corpse running treats death as failure in games that now treat death as learning. If a game is actively encouraging players to die and retry over and over again, why are their deaths still being punished? How is it beneficial to add friction to a behavior that they're actively trying to teach? Corpse running made sense when survival through an area was the challenge. But when mastery comes from repeated boss attempts, the mechanic stops reinforcing tension and instead interrupts the learning process the game is built around. Now, just to be clear, I don't think corpse running is bad design, and I'm not saying people who enjoy it are wrong or stuck in the past. It isn't artificial difficulty, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's unfair either. The idea itself makes sense. But next time you play one of these games, I want you to pay attention to something. When you die and go back to pick up your runes, shade, or whatever resource the game uses, ask yourself, is this moment actually tense? Matter of fact, you can even go and watch a YouTuber playing one of these games after this. And when you do, pay attention to how they interact with the corpse running system. Are they locked in, focused on whether or not they'll recover it, or are they casually talking or thinking about something else? I can almost guarantee that most of the time, the corpse run retrieval is treated more like an afterthought than a high stakes moment anymore. Like something done on the way to a more important task you actually care about. And if a mechanic designed to create tension is mostly experienced as an inconvenience, then it isn't really fulfilling its purpose anymore. Yes, corpse running enables interesting tricks and speedrun strategies, but when we judge a mechanic, the question isn't whether or not it can create some cool moments, but if the intended benefits outweigh its cost. And I don't think the modern corpse run does. Corpse running didn't become bad. Games just evolved past the problem it was designed to solve.